Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today, we will look again at using an object library to manipulate a Microsoft Excel workbook. This was our PowerBasic application at the end of the last video. We have supplied our application with a test spreadsheet. This Excel workbook contains 3 sheets: a My File sheet, a second sheet, and a Cities sheet. In this first sheet, we have 3 rows of data at the top of the spreadsheet we do not actually require. In our last video, I showed you how we could remove these lines of data to leave just the header line and the raw data. We also showed you how to insert a new row and a new column into the data. What we're going to do in today's video is we're going to replicate what we did in the last video, removing these 3 lines from the top of the spreadsheet, inserting the row and the column, but today we're going to be populating that column. If you haven't watched the previous videos in this series, it would be ideal to watch these now. The part 1 will tell you how we generated the PBXL include file. This is generated by PowerBasic's COM browser. So the application starts in our PB main function. In here we're attempting to delete a spreadsheet called updated. And further down we are calling a function whose task it is to remove those 3 header lines that we no longer need or require within our spreadsheet. We're going to leave that code in as its task is to produce the new updated spreadsheet. And we're going to use that updated spreadsheet as the starting point of today's video. We're going to take that updated spreadsheet and use that as the basis for another spreadsheet. We're going to populate the header and the data within that new column we created in the previous video. And we're then going to save the spreadsheet to a new name, Balance Updated. So in this part of the code here, the first thing we'll do is to delete any evidence of a balance updated spreadsheet to allow our application to be rerunnable. We can do this by simply using the kill command within a try-catch block. This will ensure if this spreadsheet exists, it will be erased from the disk and will not generate an error if the file does not exist. Next, we're going to call a new function to add and populate this new column. We'll call this function addNewColumn, taking a single parameter, which is the path to and the name of the spreadsheet. As we did in the previous videos, our first task within this new function is to define the 3 objects we'll be using to manipulate Excel. One for the Excel application itself, one for the workbook, and one for the worksheet. If you've watched the previous 4 videos, these should be quite familiar to you by now. And we're going to be creating a number of local variables to keep track of what we're actually doing. So as we've done before, our first task is to open Excel as an application first, then open the workbook, and then open the worksheet within that workbook. This is using the 3 functions we created in the previous videos, which should be now quite familiar to you. Before we go any further, we're going to compile and run our application to produce the spreadsheet we're actually going to be working on. So Excel is now opened, and it has successfully saved our worksheet. So let's open up that new spreadsheet. Here it is, called Updated XLS. As you will see in here, this is what we ended up at the end of the last video. We'd added a new column in the E column. We'd added a new row on row 5. What we're going to be doing today is a technique, one of many, to be able to populate data within this E column. We're going to populate this new column with the header account balance. This is to contain the monetary value that each of these records has in their bank account. So in order to perform this task, we first have to work out where the blank column is. Now we know since we added it in the previous video, but we're going to create a function whose job it will be to find the first Excel blank column. Almost identical to the function we created to find the first Excel blank row. So this is another new function for our library. This new function is almost identical to the blank row function. We're passing it three parameters: the worksheet object, the row that we wish to start at, and the maximum number of columns we wish to search. In here we're starting at column 0, and our first task in the do loop is to increment that value, so we start at column 1. And then we're using the Excel worksheet object on cells for the particular row in cell and get the value that is contained within that cell. We're storing that in the v-value variant variable. If the value in that cell is an empty len string, then we have detected the blank column. We're then setting our long found to true and exiting the loop. This loop would continue until we reached the maximum number of columns that we wish to search. And if the long found variable is true, we would then return the column number that we had detected. So this will allow us to find the first blank column. We're setting our starting row to be row 1. The maximum number of columns we wish to search is 256. This is an arbitrary number. You can set this to be however many you want to search in your spreadsheet. And the value returned will either be 0 because we have not found the column, or it will be the number of the column itself. Our next task is to define the name of the header of that column, and we're going to call this one account balance. And we'll use one of the functions we have got previously to populate that cell, passing it the object of the worksheet, the row, the column, the data we want to put into that cell, and an optional value coming back should any error occur. If this returns true, we have successfully managed to add our column header. Before we go any further, we will save this work to a new file. We'll call that balance updated. And we're going to use the function we've used in the previous videos to save the Excel worksheet. This should allow us to test to see if we've managed to add the column successfully to our blank column. So if we try running that now, it will load the initial spreadsheet, perform the removal of the top 3 rows, and it will then attempt to put our new column header in, which it's saying it has done successfully. So let's have a look at the file. So we now have a balance updated spreadsheet. If we open that up, we will see we now have the words account and balance in the E column, in the first row. So now what we want to do is we want to populate these next 3 cells. We're going to use our existing function to work out where the blank row is, and we're going to populate each of these values with one command. There are a number of ways of actually doing that. We could just call the function we've just used to put the data in the header line. But rather than doing that, we're going to make an attempt to use the clipboard. Since the clipboard is common to both the Power Basic application and Excel itself, we can populate the clipboard from inside Power Basic and then use one of the Excel functions to paste it in for us. This gives us an easy way for populating ranges within Excel. So we're going to use one of the functions we prepared in a previous video, the find first Excel blank row, to determine where this blank row appears in the spreadsheet. I'm going to populate a variable called column starter. This is defining the column into which we will actually check to see if it has a value or not. When we find one with no value, then this will be considered the blank row. We're setting the maximum number of rows we're going to read to be 256, and we're calling our function to return the row which has the first blank value within it. If this returns a number greater than 0, then we've found the first blank row. So if we have a look at our spreadsheet again, we will see that we want to start at row number 2 and we want to end at row number 4. Now the function we've just called will return the value 5, because this is the first one which has a blank within it. So we want to reduce that number by 1, so it becomes 4, and we're going to write into the E column for rows 2, 3 and 4. So we use the decrement command to reduce the long row by 1. And we're going to be inserting data up until that particular row. Now we're going to use a little random routine here to generate some data to put in. We're going to use strdata to contain the data we wish to paste into our spreadsheet. And we're doing a little for next loop to populate strdata with a random number. This is going to be a random number generated between 10,000 and 50,000 and divided by 100. This will give us a monetary value between 100 and 500 with 2 decimal places. As we generate each of these random monetary values, we're going to be adding on a control line feed character to the end of this. This is very useful because this will be used when we paste the data into Excel. Having done that, we will have a control line feed at the end of that string, and we want to trim that one off. We can trim off the trailing control line feed character by using the rtrim command, which takes 2 parameters, the variable containing the string and the characters you wish to trim off the end of that string. We've now populated this variable with the data we wish to paste into the spreadsheet. We can now reset the clipboard and set the text on the clipboard equal to that variable. This quite easily adds our text to the clipboard. Now we're going to create a new function to paste into the Excel spreadsheet from the clipboard. So we'll set the row starting at row number 2. The column we're going to be using has already been defined. So this will be our new function, paste into Excel from clipboard, taking 4 parameters. The object, which is the worksheet, the row and the column number, and passing back an error variable should one occur. If this returns true, then we have successfully managed to paste from our clipboard into Excel. So let's have a look at our library and we'll create this new function. So this is a new function, paste into Excel from clipboard, taking 4 parameters. The object, which is the Excel worksheet, the row and column numbers, and the error should one occur to be passed back to the calling routine. This is going to be a very straightforward function. We will create a local error variable in order to pick up any errors that occur. Since we're going to be performing a function on the spreadsheet, we're going to be using object call, and we'll be operating on the worksheet object. And since we're going to be working on 1 or more cells, we're going to use cells. And we need to pass it the row and the column numbers. Now we've defined the area on the spreadsheet where we're going to start our pasting. And then we quite simply have to add paste special to the end of this command. And that single line of code will paste whatever is on our clipboard into the spreadsheet, starting at that particular cell. And as we've added carriage return line feeds to the end of each part of the string, it will put these into adjacent cells. In order to determine whether that's worked or not, we then have to test the object result again, as we've done in many of these commands. And we will either return true to say the function has successfully managed to paste, or we will return false with the error in the error variable. So if we save that and compile our application, and let's go back to the exe itself. If we run our exe, Excel will be opened, our new column inserted, and Excel's open again. We've added the column header and it's telling us we have successfully pasted the data into the spreadsheet. So let's open up the spreadsheet, the balance updated spreadsheet, and see if our data has appeared. And there we have data sitting in the E column in the first 3 rows. Again, monetary values randomly generated into the spreadsheet. So in summary, what we've achieved today is we've used the clipboard as a go-between for information leaving Power Basic and going into our Excel spreadsheet. This can be a very easy way to get bulk data going into a spreadsheet. Hopefully you'll find these routines useful in your applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.